Three Apache women, one fearless cowboy, and a choice that would change all of their lives forever. Hunted by ruthless Comanche warriors, three sisters had only seconds left before certain death, until a 23-year-old cowboy named Samuel rode straight into danger without thinking of himself. He risked everything to save complete strangers. But what happened 10 years later shocked everyone. The three women returned, not for revenge, not for a reward, but with an unbelievable proposal that forced Samuel to make the hardest decision of his life. What choice did he make? And which woman captured his heart forever? Stay until the end, because this unforgettable story will leave you inspired, emotional, and completely speechless. Watch Love in the Wild West on the next video app as soon as possible. Please subscribe to my channel. Here is the English translation of the script. I have corrected the typos found in the original Spanish text, such as character names and grammatical errors, to ensure the English version flows naturally and maintains the dramatic tone of the story. The blazing sun beat down mercilessly on the red rocks of the canyon. Samuel Thompson, a young cowboy barely 23 years old, was guiding his horse along the dusty trail when he heard the screams. They were not screams of joy. They were screams of pure terror. His heart began to race. Samuel stopped his horse and pricked up his ears. The screams were coming from the other side of the rocky hill. Without thinking twice, he spurred his mount and galloped toward the sound. What he saw when he reached the top made his blood run cold. Three Apache women were running desperately through the valley. Behind them, a dozen Comanche warriors rode at full speed, letting out war cries that echoed among the stones. Samuel knew this story all too well. The enemy tribes had been in conflict for years, and these women were being hunted like prey. If the Comanches caught them, they would take them as hostages to harm the Apache tribe, or worse, leave them abandoned in unknown territory to die alone. Samuel didn't hesitate. There was no time for elaborate plans. There was only time to act. He rode down the hill at a full gallop, straight toward the women. Dust flew behind him like a golden cloud. The three women saw him approaching, and for a moment the fear in their eyes intensified. Another attacker. But Samuel raised his hand in a sign of peace while shouting in the little Apache he knew. "Friends, help. Get on." The tallest of the women, with black hair braided with turquoise beads, understood first. She shouted something to the other two in their language. Samuel slowed his horse beside them. There was no time for introductions. The first woman jumped on behind him with surprising agility. The other two ran toward them. The Comanche warriors were less than 100 meters away. "The high rocks!" Samuel shouted, pointing east. "Run there!" The remaining two women nodded and began running in that direction, while Samuel, with the first woman clinging to his back, galloped in circles to distract the pursuers. It worked. 5 of the Comanche warriors changed direction and went after him. Samuel's horse was strong and fast, a magnificent stallion he had raised since it was a colt. But carrying 2 people was different. He could feel the speed decreasing with every stride. The Comanches were getting closer. Samuel could hear the hooves of their horses pounding the hard earth. By the way, if this story is capturing your attention, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and let us know in the comments which country you are watching from. We love knowing where our listeners are from. Onward. The other 2 women had reached the rock formations. They were enormous towers of red stone eroded by centuries of wind and rain, full of cracks and narrow passages. Samuel knew this place. He had hunted here many times. He knew a secret passage. He guided his horse directly toward the rocks, so close that the leg of the woman behind him brushed against the rough stone. The Comanches shouted in frustration. 2 of them tried to follow him through the same path, but their horses were larger and didn't fit. They crashed against the rocks and had to retreat. Samuel continued forward, winding between the stone formations like a snake. The passage became narrower and narrower. Finally, he reached a dead end where the other 2 women were waiting. Huddled against the rock, their eyes wide with a mix of fear and hope. Samuel jumped off his horse. The The woman who had been behind him also dismounted, and the three looked at each other. Then they looked at him. They were beautiful, each in her own way. The first one with the turquoise beads had dark, penetrating eyes that seemed to look straight into the soul. The second was shorter, with an athletic build and the strong hands of a worker. The third was the youngest, with delicate features and a small scar on her cheek. Outside, the Comanches surrounded the rocks, looking for another entrance. Samuel knew they would eventually find it, but he also knew something else. "You are in Apache territory now," Samuel whispered, pointing toward the mountains to the north. "If we can get there, you will be safe." The woman with the turquoise beads nodded. She said something in Apache, and the other two became alert. Then she addressed Samuel in broken but understandable Spanish. "Thank you, Cowboy. I am Anna. They are my sisters." She pointed to the athletic one. "Kiona." She pointed to the youngest. "Nalinol." "Samuel," he replied, touching his hat. "And you're welcome. We are not safe yet." The Comanche shouts were getting closer. In seconds, they had disappeared into the shadows of the upper formations. Samuel took a deep breath, said a silent prayer, and then galloped out of the hiding spot, making as much noise as possible. The Comanche saw him immediately and shouted with excitement. The prey had emerged from his hiding place. What followed was the most dangerous chase of Samuel's life. He galloped through narrow canyons and wide valleys, jumped over dry streams, and dodged giant cacti. The Comanches were hot on his heels, so close he could hear their breathing. But Samuel was smart. He knew the land. He led them in circles, leaving false tracks, passing over rocky beds where hooves left no marks. Gradually, he drew them away from the women, heading south into territory they did not know well. Finally, as the sun began to set, Samuel found what he was looking for, a narrow gorge that led into a labyrinth of canyons. He entered at full speed, and the Comanches followed. They were finding the way. Samuel thought quickly. His horse could not carry 4 people and run fast enough. They needed another plan. He looked up. The rock formations had ledges and natural cracks. A crazy idea began to form in his mind. "Can you climb?" he asked, pointing upward. The 3 women followed his gaze and nodded without hesitation. Of course they could. They were Apaches. They had grown up in these lands. "Climb. I will distract the Comanches. I will lead them in the opposite direction. When they leave, you come down and run north. Do not stop until you reach safe territory." Anna looked at him intently. Her eyes filled with something Samuel couldn't identify at that moment. Respect, perhaps, or something deeper. "Why help?" she asked. "You are not Apache?" Samuel shrugged. "Because it is the right thing to do." Without waiting for an answer, he mounted his horse again. The women were already climbing, moving among the rocks with a grace that seemed impossible. The afternoon sun painted the sky in oranges and reds, casting long shadows over the land. Samuel paused for a moment, took off his hat, and wiped the sweat from his forehead. He was 33 years old now, and although his body remained strong, he sometimes felt as though he had lived 2 lives. The first life had been one of adventure and danger. The second, his current life, was one of solitude and hard work. His ranch was not large, just a few hectares, where he raised horses and grew enough to survive. The house was small but solid, built with his own hands from wood and stone. It had a stove that worked well, a comfortable bed, and a table where he ate alone every night, always alone. The nearest neighbors were the Martinez family about 3 kilometers to the east. Don Roberto Martinez, his wife Carmela, their 8-year-old daughter Rosa, and grandmother Lucia lived on a similar ranch. But inside the labyrinth, Samuel knew every turn, every secret exit. In less than 10 minutes, he had completely lost his pursuers. Exhausted, covered in dust and sweat, Samuel stopped his horse in a small, hidden cave. His heart beat like a war drum. His horse panted with white foam at its muzzle. But they were alive, and most importantly, the 3 Apache women were safe. Samuel did not know at that moment that what he had done that day would change his life forever. He did not know that 10 years later, those same 3 women would come looking for him. He did not know that he would have to make the most difficult decision of his life. All he knew in that moment, resting in that cave with his faithful horse by his side, was that he had done the right thing. And sometimes doing the right thing is all that matters. 10 years later, the wind blew softly over the plains of New Mexico as Samuel Thompson hammered another post into the dry earth of his ranch. Samuel visited them occasionally, and they visited him, but he mostly kept to himself, not because he disliked company, but because he had learned long ago that it was easier to be alone than to risk losing the people he loved. His parents had died when he was 12, fever. His younger sister had died a year later, also fever. Samuel had grown up alone, working on different ranches, learning the cowboy trade, keeping on the move to avoid feeling the pain of staying still. But now, at 33, he was tired of moving. He wanted roots. He wanted a place to call home, only that home felt empty. Samuel was hammering the last nail of the day when he heard galloping. He looked up and saw Rosa Martinez approaching at full speed on her, her black hair flying behind her like a flag. Samuel's heart skipped a beat. Rosa never galloped like that unless something was wrong. "Don Samuel! Don Samuel!" the girl shouted, tears running down her cheeks. Samuel dropped the hammer and ran toward her. Rosa barely managed to stop her pony before screaming, "It's Grandma! Bad men came. They took her." Samuel's world stopped for a second. "What men? Where is your family?" Men with bandanas came to the ranch. Rosa sobbed. "They wanted our horses." Papa said, "No, they got angry. They took Grandma and said, if we didn't give them all the horses by tomorrow, they would take her far away and we would never see her again. Mama and Papa are crying. They don't know what to do." Samuel felt rage boiling in his chest. Bandits, cowards taking advantage of defenseless families. He took the reins of Rosa's pony and helped her down. Rosa listened to me carefully. "Did you see which way they went?" The girl nodded, wiping her tears toward the western hills. "I saw dust in that direction." "How many were there?" "4, I think, or 5. "I'm not sure." Samuel nodded. "All right, little one, you did very well coming here. Now, I want you to go to my house. Go inside and stay there until I return." "Understood." "But Don Samuel, what are you going to do?" "I am going to bring your grandma back," Samuel said with a determination that made Rosa stop crying and look at him with hopeful eyes. Samuel saddled his horse faster than ever. He took his rifle, though he hoped not to have to use it. He took his lasso, his canteen, and some basic provisions. In less than 5 minutes, he was galloping toward the western hills as the sun began to set on the horizon. The tracks were easy to follow. 5 horses moving without haste. The bandits probably thought no one would follow them until the next morning when the Martinez family would have to hand over the horses. That gave Samuel an advantage, the element of surprise. He rode for nearly an hour, following the tracks through dry valleys and rocky hills. The light was fading quickly, but Samuel knew these lands like the palm of his hand. He had hunted here, explored every corner during years of solitude. Finally, he saw the faint glow of a campfire in a small canyon ahead. Samuel dismounted and tied his horse to a sturdy bush. He approached on foot, moving silently, as the old trackers he had worked with in his youth had taught him. From behind a large rock, he observed the camp. 5 men, just as Rosa had said, were sitting around the fire, laughing and eating. To the side, tied to a small tree, was Grandma Lucia. She was 70 years old, but her gaze was defiant even in that situation. Samuel felt admiration for the old woman. Then he began to plan. He couldn't just ride in shooting. It was 5 against 1, and they could hurt Grandma. He needed to be smart. He needed to use what he did best, think fast and move faster. He waited until darkness was complete. The bandits were still around the fire, now passing a bottle among themselves. Samuel smiled. That would make things easier. Silently, he slid toward where the bandits' horses were tied. One by one, he cut the ropes holding them. The horses, nervous at the presence of a stranger, began to slowly move away from the camp. Samuel encouraged them with gentle pats, sending them in different directions. Then, he took a large stone and threw it far to the other side of the canyon. It made a tremendous noise when it hit the rocks. The bandits jumped to their feet, reaching for their weapons. "What was that?" one shouted. "Go check, idiots," ordered the one who seemed to be the leader. 3 of the bandits ran off toward the sound, leaving only 2 by the fire. Samuel moved like a shadow, approaching from behind the first bandit and hitting him on the head with the butt of his rifle. The man fell without making a sound. The second bandit turned around just in time to see Samuel launch himself at him. They struggled for a moment, but Samuel was stronger and faster. In seconds, the bandit was also unconscious on the ground. Samuel ran to Grandma Lucia and cut her bonds. The man fell like a sack of potatoes. The other 2 hesitated for a second, which was enough. Samuel seized the moment, took his lasso from his belt, and threw it with expert precision. He caught the second bandit by the ankles and pulled hard. The man tripped and fell face first. The third bandit pulled out a knife, but Samuel was faster. He kicked the bandit's hand, sending the weapon flying into the darkness. Then he hit him with the butt of his rifle, leaving him unconscious alongside his companions. Breathing heavily, Samuel tied the 5 bandits with their own ropes. Grandma Lucia watched him from horseback with a mix of awe and admiration. "You are a good man, Samuel Thompson," she said, as they rode back under the moonlight. "Someday, you will find someone who values that noble heart of yours." Samuel did not respond. "It's okay, Mom." The old woman nodded, her eyes shining with gratitude. "I knew you would come, boy." "We have to get out of here fast," Samuel whispered. "The other 3 will be back soon." But before they could move, they heard shouts. The other bandits had returned and saw their unconscious companions. "There," one shouted, pointing directly at Samuel and the old woman. Samuel took the old woman's hand. "Run, Mom. Run as fast as you can toward my horse. It's behind that large rock. I will hold them off." "Go." Grandma Lucia did not argue. Despite her age, she ran surprisingly fast into the darkness. Samuel stood firm, blocking the path. The 3 bandits approached furiously. What followed was a fight Samuel would remember for the rest of his life. Samuel dodged the first punch, then the second. His training as a cowboy had taught him to be quick with his hands. He blocked a blow and responded with one of his own that connected cleanly with the first bandit's jaw. His heart began to beat faster for no apparent reason. When they finally got close enough, Samuel felt as if time had stopped. It was them, the 3 Apache women he had saved 10 years ago. But they were no longer the frightened young girls running for their lives. Now they were adult women, beautiful and confident. Anna, the one who had worn the turquoise beads, now wore a suede dress decorated with intricate embroidery. Her black hair fell in perfect braids, adorned with feathers and precious stones. Her eyes were still as penetrating as he remembered, but now there was a depth in them that spoke of wisdom and experience. Kiona, the athletic one, dressed more practically in leather pants and a suede shirt. She carried a beautifully carved bow on her back, and her posture revealed the strength of a trained warrior. Her gaze was direct and brave. Neelan, the youngest, had blossomed into a delicate beauty. At that moment, he could not imagine that those words would be prophetic, nor that the person who would value his heart already knew him and had never forgotten him. When they arrived at the Martinez ranch, the family ran to embrace Grandma. There were tears of joy and infinite gratitude. Don Roberto offered money, horses, anything. But Samuel refused everything. Neighbors help each other was all he said before riding back to his solitary ranch, unaware that his life was about to change forever. Samuel was repairing the corral fence when he saw dust on the horizon. 3 riders were approaching slowly along the dusty road leading to his ranch. He stopped, squinting against the morning sun, and watched with curiosity. He wasn't expecting visitors. As the riders got closer, Samuel noticed something peculiar. They didn't ride like cowboys. They rode with the upright posture and elegance of those born on horseback, and their silhouettes were clearly feminine. "I only did the right thing both times. That is why we are here," said Anna. The three women exchanged glances as if communicating without words. Then, from their saddlebags, they began to take out objects. Blankets woven with incredible designs, hand-painted ceramic vessels, turquoise and silver necklaces, high-quality tanned hides, leather bags filled with medicinal herbs. Each gift was more beautiful than the last. "This is too much," Samuel protested. "You can't give me all this." "It is not enough," Anna responded firmly. "You saved our lives. You returned us to our families. By the traditions of our people, we have a debt that must be paid." Samuel shook his head. "You owe me nothing, really." "Then don't do it for the debt," said Kiona, stepping forward. Her eyes shone with something Samuel couldn't decipher. "Do it because we want to." Now, Lindley also approached. "Samuel, for 10 years, we have remembered you." She wore a dress decorated with colored beads forming patterns that seemed to tell stories. Her expression was soft but determined. Samuel slowly took off his hat, unable to believe what his eyes were seeing. The three women dismounted gracefully and stopped in front of him. For a moment, no one spoke. The silence was filled with unexpressed gratitude with 10 years of distance that suddenly seemed to vanish. Finally, Anna stepped forward. Her Spanish had improved notably. "Samuel Thompson, we have been looking for you for a long time. I remember you," was all Samuel could say, still stunned. "How did you find me?" "And Apache never forgets," said Kiana with a smile. "And never stops looking for the one who saved her life," Nanley added softly. "We asked in many towns, many ranches. Finally, someone spoke of a lonely cowboy who had rescued an old woman from bandits recently. We knew it was you, the man who helps without asking for anything in return." Samuel felt his cheeks warm. His mind was a whirlwind of confusion, surprise, and something else he dared not name. Kiona spoke, her voice strong but kind. "We know it is a lot to process. We do not expect an answer now, but we wanted you to know the truth. You saved us, Samuel, and in that act, you stole our hearts, all three of them," Nellanley added softly. "You do not have to choose any of us if you don't want to. You do not have to feel obligation. We just wanted you to know that there are 3 women in this world who consider you the most honorable man they have ever known." Samuel looked at the 3 women before him. Each one was beautiful, yes. But more than that, each radiated strength, intelligence, and kindness. He could see in their eyes that they spoke with sincerity. It was not a game or a cultural obligation. It was real. "I live alone," Samuel said finally, his voice. "For many years, I have gotten used to solitude. The brave cowboy who risked his life for 3 strangers, the man of good heart who asked for no reward." Anna took Samuel's hand in hers. Her touch was warm and soft. "We have come to tell you something important, something our hearts have known since that day 10 years ago." Samuel felt the world spinning around him. What thing? The 3 women looked at each other again. Then, as if they had rehearsed the moment 1,000 times, they spoke almost in unison. But it was Anna who spoke the complete words. "We want to marry you, Samuel. Each of us loves you in her own way. Each of us has dreamed of you during all these years. We know it is strange for your culture, but in our traditions, a man can choose among several suitors, and we have chosen to present ourselves to you together with honesty." The silence that followed was so profound that Samuel could hear the beating of his own heart. He began, but the words stuck in his throat. "To not depending on anyone, to not letting anyone depend on me, because everyone I have loved, I have lost." Anna squeezed his hand. "Solitude is safe, but it is not life. Love is a risk, but it is the only thing that makes it worth waking up every morning. Besides, said Kiona with a mischievous smile, you are not as used to solitude as you think. You saved Grandma Lucia a week ago. A true loner would not have risked his life for an old woman. Samuel couldn't help but smile at that. She was right. Stay, he said suddenly, surprising himself. At least for a few days. Let me get to know you. Really. Not as the man who saved you 10 years ago, but as the man I am now, and you get to know me as the women you are today, not as the frightened girls of back then. The three women smiled, and in those smiles Samuel saw hope, joy, and some relief. We will stay, agreed Anna. But Samuel, you must know one more thing. Eventually, you will have to choose only one of us. Our traditions allow a woman to court a man, but marriage is between two people. We know this and accept it. But whoever is not chosen will remain your friend and sister forever. I don't want to hurt anyone, Samuel said honestly. Honesty never hurts as much as lying, replied Nalanli. Just be yourself. The rest will happen as it should. The days passed like a strange and wonderful dream for Samuel. The three women had settled into his ranch, each showing their unique skills in ways that constantly amazed him. Anna spent the mornings in the small garden behind the house, identifying wild herbs and planting medicinal seeds she had brought from her tribe. Her hands seemed to have magic when they touched the earth. She taught Samuel about plants that cured headaches, wounds, and fevers. When they talked, their conversations were deep and calm, about life, nature, and the meaning of simple things. Kiona woke before dawn to train Samuel's horses. She had a natural gift with animals. The wildest colts calmed under her touch. She showed Samuel techniques he had never seen, ways of communicating with horses that went beyond simple commands. She was direct, honest, and her laughter was like the free wind of the mountains. Nolanly transformed the interior of Samuel's house. She hung curtains she had woven herself, creating patterns of light and shadow that made the rooms seem larger and cozier. In the afternoons, she sat by the window and created art with beads and leather while telling him ancient stories of her people. Her voice was musical, and Samuel found himself working slower just to listen to her better. But Samuel knew he would have to make a decision, and that decision terrified him. On the afternoon of the 5th day, Samuel was in the stable when he noticed something strange. The sky to the west had turned a sickly yellow. The horses were restless, kicking the ground and neighing nervously. Samuel had lived long enough in these lands to know what it meant. A sandstorm, and it would be big. He ran to the house. We have to prepare. A storm is coming. The three women wasted no time with useless questions. Anna began securing everything outside. Kiona led all the horses into the large stable and closed the doors tightly. Nala closed all the windows and doors of the house, sealing the cracks with wet rags. Samuel climbed onto the roof to secure loose tiles when he saw something that made his blood run cold. In the distance on the road toward the Martinez ranch, he saw a small figure. It was Rosa riding her pony, galloping desperately toward her home, trying to reach it before the storm caught her, but she wouldn't make it. The wall of sand was approaching too fast, a roaring mass of dust and wind that could disorient anyone in seconds. A little girl would have no chance. Samuel didn't think twice. He jumped from the roof, ran to the stable, and mounted his fastest horse. Kiona saw him and understood immediately. "I am going with you," she shouted, jumping onto another horse. "It's too dangerous. 2 eyes see better than one in a sandstorm," Kiona responded firmly. "Don't argue. Let's go." There was no time to argue. Samuel spurred his horse and galloped out with Kiona by his side. The wind was already blowing hard, raising small dust devils. They had minutes, maybe less. They galloped toward where he had seen Rosa. Visibility was worsening rapidly. The sand began to sting their skin like tiny needles. Samuel covered his mouth and nose with his bandana and shouted Rosa's name over and over. "There!" Kiona shouted, pointing to the right. Samuel saw Rosa's pony running in circles, frightened, but Rosa was not on it. She had fallen. Samuel's heart skipped a beat. He spurred his horse harder as the wall of sand approached like a roaring monster. Samuel could feel the sand getting everywhere, in his eyes, in his ears, in his mouth. Despite the bandana, Rosa trembled in his arms, crying. He held her tighter. "You are safe," he shouted into her ear. "I won't let go." He didn't know how much time passed. It could have been minutes or hours. Time lost meaning in that hell of sand and wind. All that existed was the constant effort to breathe, to keep his eyes closed, to not let go of Rosa. At some point, Samuel felt Kiona's hand find his. She squeezed it tightly, and that simple gesture gave him strength. He was not alone in this. Someone else was fighting by his side. Finally, slowly, the roar began to decrease. The wind lost its fury. The sand stopped flying so violently, Samuel dared to open his eyes a slit. The storm was passing. When it finally ended, the three of them got up slowly, completely covered in brown dust. They looked like sand statues. Rosa coughed and cried, but she was unharmed. Finally, he saw Rosa lying on the ground, clinging to a bush while the wind tried to drag her away. Samuel jumped off and ran to her. He lifted her into his arms just as the storm hit them with full fury. The world turned brown. He couldn't see beyond his own hand. The roar of the wind was deafening. Kiona appeared beside him like a ghost in the storm. She had caught Rosa's pony and was holding it firmly. She shouted something, but Samuel couldn't hear her over the wind. She pointed downward, and Samuel understood. There was a natural depression in the terrain, a small hollow that would offer some protection. They crawled there, fighting against the wind that tried to tear them from the ground. Samuel held Rosa against his chest, protecting her from the flying sand. Kiona huddled next to them, using her body to create an additional barrier. The three horses grouped together nearby, instinctively seeking protection in numbers. The storm raged around them like a living beast. The storm had cleared the air, but it had left something unresolved floating between them. Samuel knew the time had come. He could no longer postpone the decision. "I need to talk to you," he said finally, "about what I feel, about what I must do." The three women nodded, their faces serious but understanding. The most difficult conversation of Samuel's life was about to begin. The fireplace crackled softly, filling the small room with a golden light that danced on the walls. Samuel stood by the window, looking at the stars that shone with unusual clarity after the sandstorm. The three women were seated, waiting patiently. The silence was heavy but not uncomfortable. Samuel took a deep breath and turned to face them. "Throughout my adult life," he began, his voice with emotion, "I have protected myself. I have built walls around my heart because losing my family when I was a child taught me that love hurts, that trusting someone is risking unbearable pain." The horses shook their heads, sending clouds of dust into the air. Samuel looked at Kiona. She looked back at him, and in that moment, without words, something happened between them. An understanding, a connection forged in shared danger. But then Samuel thought of Anna and Nolan lay waiting at the ranch, probably frantic with worry. He thought about how Anna had held his hand days ago. He thought about Nalina's musical laughter, and his heart felt pulled in three directions. They mounted slowly and returned to the ranch. Rosa rode with Samuel, still clinging to him. When they arrived, Anna and Nolan ran toward them. There were tears in Anna's eyes as she helped Rosa off the horse. "I thought I had lost you," she whispered. "Now," Lindley hugged Kiona. "Thank you for taking care of him." That night, after Rosa was returned safe and sound to her grateful parents, the four of them sat around the table in silence. Anna watched him with those deep, understanding eyes. Kiona had her hands clasped on the table, her posture alert but relaxed. Neelanli played distractedly with a bead from her necklace, listening attentively. "But you three came into my life like a storm," Samuel continued, "and you have shown me that I have been living only half a life. That fear has stolen years of happiness from me." He approached the table and sat down in front of them. His eyes moved from one face to another, memorizing every detail. "Kona," he said, turning to her first. The woman lifted her chin, her brave eyes meeting his. "You are like the free wind of the mountains, strong, independent, brave. Today, you saved my life out there in that storm. Your spirit is so great that no ranch, no house, no man could contain it." Kiona opened her mouth to speak, but Samuel gently raised a hand. "Let me finish, please. You are magnificent, Kiona. But I know you well enough now to know that your heart belongs to open spaces, to adventure, to the freedom of galloping without a fixed destination. If you stay here with me, eventually you would feel caged, and I love you too much to do that." Kiona's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded slowly. "You are right," she whispered, "and I respect you more for seeing it. You will always be my brother, Samuel, the bravest man I know." Samuel felt his own chest tighten, but he turned to Nolanly. The young woman looked at him with soft, bright eyes. "Nal, you are like the art you create, delicate, beautiful, full of deep meaning. Your stories have filled this house with magic. Your laughter has made these days the happiest I have had in years." Nolanly smiled sadly, as if she already knew what was coming. "But you are a creative spirit," Samuel continued. "You need to be surrounded by beauty, by music, by other artistic souls who can appreciate your talent. When we talk at night about simple things, I feel that I have finally come home. In the storm, when I thought I might not return, it was your face I saw in my mind, your voice I heard calling me back." He took Anna's hands in his. They were strong but soft hands, hands that healed and created life. "You understand me without me having to explain myself," Samuel continued. "You see my silences and do not try to fill them with unnecessary words. You accept my past without judging me. And when you look at me, I see a future I never dared to imagine." Tears ran freely down Anna's cheeks. "Now," Samuel whispered, "I love you, Anna, not in the dramatic way of stories, but in the real and deep way that grows day by day, like a tree that sinks its roots slowly, but becomes unshakable with time. Will you marry me?" Anna sobbed and threw herself into his arms. "Yes, 1,000 times, yes. I am a simple man, Nalino. My hands are made to work the land and tame horses, not to understand the subtleties of the art you create. You deserve someone who can walk with you in that world of creativity." Nalanly let out a small sigh, but nodded. "I know, in my heart, I know. But thank you for these wonderful days, Samuel. I will never forget them." Finally, Samuel turned to Anna. She had been watching him the whole time, and in her eyes, there was something that made Samuel's heart beat faster. "Anna," he said, and his voice broke slightly. He cleared his throat and continued. "From the moment you arrived, I felt something different. It is not the wild excitement of adventure. It is not the fascination of art and beauty. It is something deeper, calmer." He stood up and walked toward her. Anna rose to meet him, her eyes never leaving his. "When I work in the field and see you caring for your garden, I feel peace. But we will return for the wedding," they both promised, and so they did. A month later, under the perfect blue sky of New Mexico, Samuel and Anna married in a ceremony that mixed Apache traditions with those of the white man. Don Roberto Martinez officiated the ceremony. Little Rosa was the flower girl. Kiona and Nalanle stood beside Anna as honored witnesses. Neighbors from nearby ranches attended along with members of Anna's tribe. It was a day of union, of bridges built between cultures, of love celebrated in all its forms. That night, when everyone had gone and the house was finally silent, Samuel and Anna sat on the porch, holding hands, looking at the stars. "Are you afraid?" Anna asked softly. "Terrified," Samuel admitted. But for the first time in my life, it is a fear I embrace because it means I have something precious to lose, and that means I am finally truly living. Anna rested her head on his shoulder. 10 years ago, you saved my life. Today, I save yours. I have loved you since the moment you risked your life for us 10 years ago, and that love has only grown. They embraced while Kiona and Nolinley stood up. The two women approached, and the four joined in a group hug. There were tears, but also laughter and acceptance. "We are sisters," said Kona firmly. "This does not change that. Anna won your heart, but the three of us gained a brother and a family." "That's right," agreed Nalina. "And we will visit often. Your children will call me Auntie, and I will tell them wonderful stories." Samuel laughed through his own tears. "Are you already planning my children?" "Of course," said Anna with a radiant smile. A healer always plans in advance. The following days were filled with preparation. Kiona announced that she would return to her tribe to become a tracker and explorer, something she had always dreamed of doing. Ninley decided to travel to Santa Fe, where she had heard that artists from many cultures gathered to create and trade. "I save you from solitude, from the walls you built, from the fear that kept you prisoner." Samuel kissed her forehead. "Then we are even." They remained like that as the night deepened. Two souls who had found their way back to each other after a decade. The lonely cowboy was no longer alone, and the Apache woman who had been saved had become the savior. Sometimes the truest love does not arrive with fireworks and drama. It arrives silently like rain in the desert, nourishing slowly until life blooms where before there was only dryness. And in that small ranch under the infinite stars, a new life had begun to flourish.